Hey, welcome back. Welcome to Survive the Hunt. I'm your host Austin, and welcome. We're back again. Um, let's see. Firstly, everybody, I want to wish everybody a happy Easter if you celebrated. Hope you had a good Easter. Um, Passover was also this past week. I hope that everyone who partakes in Passover had a good time. I fortunately was able to go to a now, forgive me if I mispronounce this because I'm not Jewish and not of Jewish faith, but I was very lucky to go ahead and be invited to a fun event called Shabbat at Chabad or the Chabad at Shabbat. It's one of those two, and it was like a party type dinner, not really like a party anything like fun, but it was a dinner and I had a lot of fun. I'd never been to anything like that, and they invited me, and I actually had a lot of fun. Let's see what else is going on in my life. Anything new? Um, Over this past weekend, I went and visited my grandparents. I have not seen them in a while, and I absolutely had a blast. It's good to see family, regardless of anything. It's always good to see family. I had a good time in Nebraska, and even last night, I had never sewn anything in my life before, and I always wanted to learn how to sew. So I somehow convinced my grandmother to teach me how to sew, and we made a an apron, which maybe that's a hint towards something I want to do in the future. Let your mind roll with that, however you feel, however you think that might be. But yeah, I had a really good time, to be honest. See what else? The book club, the Survive the Haunt book club. I finished the book from last week that we talked about. The Nick Offerman and Megan Mullally, their book about their relationship, and I thought it was hilarious. It was raunchy at some parts, just because they're funny comedians, and I enjoyed it. I have not picked the next book to read. Maybe by the end of it I can come up with something. If not, follow me on Instagram at Survive the Haunt, where I can post something. I'm thinking about going to horror, but also I'm thinking about going into Star Wars because for those who know me and for those who don't know, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I've always loved Star Wars and I've watched all the movies. I've read a few of the books. Now that I'm reading again, I really want to get back into it and have a good time. So let's see how that goes. So I wanted to start out by saying there's going to be some changes on the channel here in the next foreseeable couple weeks, and some of them I'm very excited about. You're probably going to listen and witness one of them today. So this week, let's see what else is going on in Kansas City. Or I'm going to be in Kansas City this week, going to Panic Fest. It is a horror movie festival that takes place in Kansas City. I absolutely love it. I went last year for the first time, and I'm so glad to be back. And we're gonna do it again. What else? Oh, I scheduled a massage for the first time ever. I've never had a professional massage besides like someone scratching my back and calling that a massage. So I'm excited to try that. I'm a little nervous. I've never done anything like this, but I thought I would treat myself and looking forward to it. So a little bit about this movie before we start. I had I thought that I had seen this movie. I one of two things, saw it and completely forgot it, or talked about it so much with my friends that I just never saw it and I took what they told me, so I learned it by proxy. This movie fucking slaps. It was fun as shit. There is a lot of issues with it, I will say that, but man, it was fun. I had such a good time. I watched it last night. I watched it today, day of recording, which was Mondays, always on Mondays, and I absolutely loved it. So much fun. This is a movie that I recommend everybody watch because it is bananas. It is bonkers bananas, and I loved it. A couple of things that we're going to talk about beforehand that needs to be addressed is that the Abraham Lincoln in this, the character, is like a pre-Civil War slash Civil War Forrest Gump. Anybody who is anybody at the time is thrown Abraham Lincoln's direction, and he just like bumbles his way through certain parts of history, but have it all loop back to vampires. I thought it was pretty cool. Some of it doesn't make any sense, but some of it was really fun, and I absolutely loved it. This one thing about vampires that they set with this one that is different from other ones is in this one, vampires can walk in the day. They are not like creatures of the night. They're daytime, nighttime. They don't need to be like stabbed in the heart, but they will die from that if it's silver. Anything silver will kill them, but also like beheading will kill them. And something else that they add to it, which we'll talk about more in the movie, like when we're talking about it, is they have a rule in this where a vampire can't kill another vampire, and it becomes a plot point at some points, but then it's disregarded at others, and it it makes sense. It's just plot armor that they added. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I absolutely love this movie. Like I said before, I think everybody should watch it. It is well worth the watch. So we gotta jump right into it. So the movie begins with a verse from the Bible, specifically Genesis 17:5, which is, "Your name will be Abraham, for I've made you the father of many nations." And this starts by proposing that Abraham Lincoln, in this world, not our world, who Abraham Lincoln, one of the most important figures of anything, everyone knows that, I'm not denying that, but they use this in a term more for this motherfucker was destined to kill vampires. So it just starts with that. I thought it was really funny, and I was really put off at the very beginning. Like, okay, where are they going to go with this? But that's just that is how it begins. So the film truly begins with a narration of Abraham Lincoln's journal. So like what they say is, um, the way this is set is you're first shown like modern day, and then the voiceover from Abraham Lincoln. I think it was Abraham at this point was kind of talking about like some people know him as this, everyone knows him like this, but his journal, this is real. So like that starts the whole thing like, oh, this is why you didn't know he's a vampire hunter, and this is like what is like washed out of history. The film begins with a narration of Abraham Lincoln's journal. Says that he's a man who struggles against darkness. Dot dot dot. Goes on. He gives his journal to his friend Henry, who we don't meet at first. We just see him, and then we cut all the way back to 1818 when Abraham was a kid, and a slaver starts to hit his friend, whose name is, I forget his name. I have it written down later, so it'll come back up. But the movie starts with his friend getting beat up, and Abraham Lincoln, being a man of the people, and rightly so, I would have done the same thing. Goes over and he steps and he intervenes because it's also important to know that they're in a free state, even in 1818, and and he's talking to him. He's like, "This is illegal. You can't do this." And his mom walks over too and like instills this sense of value of always help people in hand, no matter what. Like it is his destiny. But in the middle of doing so, the slaver with a whip, turns to Abraham and starts hitting him too and his friend. And Abraham's father runs over and punches him in the face. And apparently they work for this guy, or they work for another guy who's there with them. Like their boss that they all worked for, because it's a family thing, I guess, walks over and says, "Everything you owe me, you pay me right now." And then he says, "I will not pay you a cent." Like Abraham's father says this, he's like, "I'm not going to pay you a cent. You don't deserve anything because you're a douchebag and a shitty person." And Abraham and the guy, who I keep forgetting his name. I'll write it's in it later. But the guy then turns to him and says, "Well, there's different ways that debts can be paid." So then we cut to some time later, and a man enters the Lincoln house, like the Lincoln's homes, and essentially turns Abraham's mother into a vampire by biting her on the wrist. This sends her into like this very painful looking death the next morning. I'm gonna guess is the next morning. She's like poison. She's got poison in her blood that vampires give. Because I think the lore with some vampires, like specifically these ones, is if they bite you and then drain part of your blood, then you turn into a vampire. But they can also just bite you and like poison you. So maybe they can control that. I don't know. I'm not a vampire. So his mom dies. Very painful. Very sad. Abraham's reading with her. They're like laying in bed. He's reading her a book, and she's following along. And it just goes quiet after a while. It's really sad. So then, 9 years later, after his mom's death, his father dies as well. We jump in time, and Abraham has vowed at that time. I'm just gonna call him Babe or Abe. I gotta go to the side. This is like an aside. The guy that cast Abraham Lincoln is a very handsome man. Which I'm not saying that like Abraham Lincoln in real life wasn't handsome, which I don't know. That's not really for me to say. But they like bought say bought. They hired a yoked up Abraham to play this dude. Like a yoked up actor. And this dude was literally Abraham Lincoln. He was shirtless in a couple scenes, like chopping wood and other shit. So like, if you like muscular men and also like history, you want that world to collide, maybe watch this movie. But we cut, like I said, 9 years later. His father has just died, and Abraham is standing over their grave, and he vows that he's going to enact revenge to whatever took his mother. And like he, in his mind, he doesn't know that there's vampires yet, but he's vowed to find out what's happening. So after some time, drunken Abraham rallies himself at a bar and goes and finds the boss who fired his father and who he thinks like killed his mom just because he made a threat. She died later. So in his mind, this person killed his mom. But it's important to also talk about while he's in the bar, he meets this guy named Henry who's like the only time, I think his exact words are, the only time someone gets drunk enough like that is to ask a girl out or to enact revenge or like kill somebody. And then he taps him on the shoulder and a gun falls to the floor. And then he kind of looks at him like, oh, I know what you are. So then Abraham walks outside and like down the road, and then he gets to this dock where this guy is like walking around. He calls him out by name, and then he points his gun at him. And when he turns around, he shoots. But when he shoots, the gun doesn't go off. Apparently, something happened with dropping it, or he just did a really bad job. But gun doesn't go off. And then the man just like looks at him, and then snarls his teeth, like, and then he's a vampire. That guy's a vampire. Abraham runs away from the man who revealed himself as a vampire, like you would, and he gets to a shack, and we get a glimpse, like he runs inside, and we get a glimpse that there's a woman on the floor with her neck ripped out and blood's everywhere. So now we know that this dude really is a vampire. And the man outside is like, let me in, like toying with him. And then he's even like, remember, you put your powder in first, then the wad, and then the ball. Do it in that order. And then like Abraham's trying to get his gun reloaded to do whatever, and the bullet falls on the floor, and he's like, "Oh, I know what that sound is." So he's like playing with his. He's basically playing with his food. So then the guy kicks down the door, and the second he kicks down the door, Abraham turns around and shoots him with his gun, and shoots him in the eye. He falls to the floor, and we think he's dead. Like he would have died. So then Abraham walks out of the shack, walks down the dock like confused in a trance almost, and he throws his gun in the river to get rid of evidence. But the second, like this is how the shot is. It's just like a shot of we're following Abraham walk down the river. He's walking, walking, walking. But when he turns his corner, we get a glimpse. If you're watching the body in the back like I was, because I know what these tropes are. This is what's gonna happen. But we just see like a fraction of a second this guy get up and vanish. So I knew that something was about to happen. Abraham throws his gun and he turns around, and the guy he had just shot is now facing him face to face. So the vampire lunges at Abraham, and the guy from the bar out of nowhere walks up to him, grabs him, like the guy, and he throws him into the dock, breaking the floor. And then as soon as he's in the like through the floor, he throws him up the side of the barn, and he goes through in slow motion, like Sherlock Holmes slow motion, goes through all the wood panels and into the roof, and he just disappears. And then Abraham Lincoln wakes up like it was all a dream. It's like it was a nightmare. But he wakes up and he's bandaged. He had scratches on his chest that are gone now, but he had like bandages everywhere. He knocks over some water to see that wherever he is at, they've been trying to take care of him. So he's walking around. He's like doesn't know what's happening. He's sneaking through the house. He arms himself. When Abe hears a scream coming from like the bathroom area, and in his mind he thinks someone's hurt. So he kicks down the door only to find that Henry, the guy from the bar, has a woman in the bathtub, and he interrupted them. So this is when we're introduced to the man the night before, Henry Sturgis. Henry goes on to talk to himself in like a split personality way. I don't know if they originally wrote this guy having a split personality because he's like walking around the room, he's talking to himself like, this dude doesn't want my help. I don't know why he's even here. I don't know why I keep testing myself or having these. He's just like rambling. So it sounds like, or what it feels like to me, is there was an original draft to this that maybe didn't get like finished. Like maybe in one of the other drafts, Henry like had split personality or something like that, because it is out of nowhere that Henry does just talk to himself. But then it's also here that Abraham's like, what happened to me last night? Or was this a dream? And then Henry tells Abe, no, vampires are real. And then he tells us all the lore about vampires, like such as we drink blood, or they drink blood, they have are alive forever unless killed. Silver kills them. The reason why silver, which is like of lore, is that when Judas betrayed Jesus, he was given 17 silver coins. I think it was 17. And from then on, God in the Bible used silver as like the ultimate sin, or like the ultimate evil. So the only thing that can like kill ultimate evil, which is a vampire, is silver. And I would love to do a video on it someday about like vampire lore, especially having read Dracula and being in love with vampires. I would love to make an episode dedicated to all vampire stuff. So then Abraham pleads to Henry to teach him how to kill vampires. Like, I want to be a vampire hunter just like you. And Henry says, if I teach you to kill your mother's murderers, you will have no friends. You will live a life of darkness. You will can't be in love. You will dedicate your life to this and only this. Abraham Lincoln agrees to this, and a training montage begins. Once again, back to montage. We're back to Benny Loves You. Is trained how to kill vampires, and it starts with Henry walks over to an aisle because Henry uses guns. He's a gun guy, and he's like walking through all these guns in the 1800s, like flintlock pistols, other like flintlock rifles. They're all like muzzle loaders because I guess, yeah, I think historically bullets weren't around yet, like prepackaged bullets. And Henry's like, which gun do you want? And Abe says, I've never been much of a gunman. And then he looks over Henry's shoulder, and there's an axe in a tree. And he says, I used to be a rail splitter, though. So then we get an epic montage. This is like the shirtless Abe, epic axe montage, because everyone should know about like Abraham Lincoln's axe. It's like a famous thing. I think it's in a museum, but I've never seen a photo of it. Maybe I'll find it, put it on Instagram. But here we get the most badass scene ever directed into modern cinema. Henry talks to Abe about you have to be strong. You can't be weak. You have to be strong. They will kill you. So he walks him outside and he's like, see this tree? And Abe's like, yeah. He says, I want you to chop it down with one swing. And Abraham Lincoln looks at him and says, yeah, no shit, no way. What are you on? And then Henry turns to him and is like, I want you to focus on what hurts you the most. Like, this is not a tree. This is trauma, like, type situation. And Abraham Lincoln goes back and he tries to take a swing at it and doesn't really do anything. So then Henry says, this is the thing you hate most. What do you hate, Mr. Lincoln? Then Abe says, Jack Barnes, the man of the guy who killed his mom. He swings, doesn't chop it down. Then Henry's like, what else? And he says, I hate my mother. I hate that my mother was taken away. Swings again, nothing. I hate that I was afraid. I hate that everyone I ever knew lived in fear. I hate that I was too weak. I hate that I failed to protect her and I let her die. And the second he said that, he gets he gets really angry, and he screams, and he hits the axe against the tree, and the tree explodes. Then Henry says some bullshit like, power does not come from hate, power is from truth, which I don't know what that means. I think they're trying to be deep, but who knows. So then again, we get another epic montage of him chopping down trees, like practicing like sword tricks, I would say, with an axe. Like he's like helicoptering an axe in front of him and shit like that. It's really funny. But one part of Abe's training, which they don't do a lot with this, but they should have, is Henry's like, you will be outmatched. In every fight, you will be outmatched. They're stronger than you, faster than you, and they can see in the dark and shit like that. So Henry takes Abe and he puts him in a dark room and he beats the fuck out of him just out of nowhere. But he's like, you have to be like one with your senses, like a Jedi moment. And this is where like if this was a Marvel movie, this is when like Captain America would say, I could do this all day. Because he hits him with a let's go again, things like that. I think that's exactly what they're going after. But eventually, after a long time, like what is shown to be a long time, but for us is only like 30 seconds, 45 seconds, because this is also like 10 minutes into the movie that we've already established the rule, which I really like. I really like that because it gets us into it. We know why you're here. You're not here for Abraham Lincoln. You're here for Vampire Slayer at the end. So good choice on them. But at the end of this epic montage, this is when we get introduced to our villains. This is like into Act 1 type scenario. We see that there are 3 villains. There's Jack Bartz, which is who Abraham hates the most. And then there's 2 other individuals. Vadoma, which is a weird name. And her brother, Adam, which they say Adam's like essentially the origin of all vampires. He's like an eternal one, has been alive for a long time. But this movie also posits that vampires have been in America for centuries. They say that they slaughtered the Indians in the very beginning and early pioneers. And now they're using the slave trade as blood banks to fuel the South. Like, apparently, and of course, if you watched True Blood like I did, all vampires are in the South. Apparently, that's where they like to be. And also, vampires are racist. Of course, they would be. But this movie posits that the reason why the South used slave labor was to feed a hungry horde of vampires that ran the South. Do with that information that you would. So then Abe goes into a monologue, which this monologue will follow through, and every single one of his monologues makes him sound like a whiny bitch. But his monologue goes, and he says that he will always remember that he has to live a life of no attachments because he can't trust anybody, because anybody he meet could be a vampire, which is a really sad way to look at it. So then we jump to some time. Abraham Lincoln now lives in Springfield, Illinois. Illinois? I think Illinois. Yes, Springfield, Illinois. And he meets Joshua Speed, who gives him root and board, which historically, I believe, I might be wrong, Joshua Speed was Abraham Lincoln's friend who like lived down the way while he was a kid or while he was like a young man. So it is on par. I don't know if he gave him a place to live and he worked for him like he did in this. Because in this, we have Abraham Lincoln moves to Springfield because that's where a lot of vampires are. And Henry said, stay here. This is where you'll kill your vampires. So he like has to find some place to blend in while he's there. Because of course. And once again, the sad boy writes to Henry the second, like, hey, I found a place to live, and I remember I ain't gonna get no bitches. Have no attachments. I'll remember to do that. And the second that he ends that letter, Mary Elizabeth Winstead walks in, who is playing Mary Todd, Abraham Lincoln's future wife. And behind her, because once again, this is just Forrest Gump and vampires, Stephen Douglas walks in, played by Alan Tudyk. If you don't know who Alan Tudyk is, yes, you do. You just don't know he did that. He's a voice actor. He's in literally everything. So they're talking. The 3 of them are talking. Joshua walks in and gives Abe a letter. And then when Abe reads it, it's a letter from Henry saying that he's given him his first target, and he reminds him to always have a contingency plan. Have a backup plan because everything you do will always go wrong. He is going to a pharmacy in Springfield, where a vampire apparently is running this pharmacy, maybe helping other vampires, but also just being vampire shit. So Abe walks in, and instead of like sneaking up with the man, he like walks up to him, goes, "Oh, hi, I'm Abraham Lincoln. I'm gonna kill you," just shit like that. So of course, Abe gets his ass kicked like you do your very first time. Got his ass kicked, and he gets sent, and like the vampire throws him through the floor and instantly ties him up, where he's upside down, axes on the floor, hands and legs are tied together, hanging from the ceiling. And the vampire comes down and is like, man, you fucking suck at this. But while this vampire's like getting ready to bleed him out, because we look to his left and his right, and like his other victims are all upside down, blood is bled out of them into bowls, and the vampire is talking to him like, don't worry, it only hurt a bit. Things like that, being creepy and like being a vampire. When out of nowhere, Abraham Lincoln drops a knife from his boot, catches it in his mouth, and then whips forward, slitting the vampire's throat with a knife in his with the knife that's in his mouth. Crunches his way up, because this is Abraham Lincoln with a six pack. Cuts his feet and hands free by using the same knife that's in his mouth. Stands up, grabs his axe, chops off the head of the vampire. And this is once again where we enter sad boy mode. Always sad boy mode. Abe gives us another monologue of, this is what I have to do. My first vampire kill. Promise there'll be more. As he's like burying a body. Which of course in all these things like vampire hunters and things like that, what are you going to do with those bodies? Because you might know that they're a vampire, but somebody else, you just killed a man. So we do see that he buries all of his victims. He takes them out into the woods and buries them, gets rid of them. So from here we get shows us a montage of Abe getting a message, kills the vampire, new message, kills the vampire, kills the vampire. But then intercut would be like Abe meets up with Mary and they go on a date. They talk, they laugh, things like that, all intercut. But eventually, Abe and Mary are walking down the street. And Mary looks at Abe and, like, in a farewell, takes off his hat from his head. She sets it on the floor, on the ground, and steps on it so she's at, like, eye level. Because, of course, Abraham Lincoln's tall. We all know that. Which I don't know. There's no fucking way that hats, specifically top hats, are strong enough to hold a person's weight. There is no way. I thought it was funny. Maybe I'm wrong. I know I'm not wrong. But I thought it was funny. And of course, Mary leans in to give Abe a kiss, and he enters sad boy mode, and she lands his side of his cheek, and he's like, I gotta go. So after Abe leaves, we get another scene where the two vampires, Adam and Vadoma, are starting to notice that, hey, our vampire friends in Springfield are dying, and it's this dude's fault. So then they're like, oh, we better go visit our friend, or pay our friend a visit. So then we get the next day. Abraham's he's working in the shop. He's like head down studying, and this guy's like, well, that's kind of weird having a shopkeeper take notes. And he's like, well, I'm studying to be a lawyer, because of course Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer. And he's like, what are your thoughts on slaves? And then he like talks to him. He's like, what do you know about free state laws? And he looks up, and it's Anthony Mackie playing Will Johnson, Abe's best friend from childhood, who he helped save, like helped him from being beat up by the guy who got his dad killed, who then also got his mom killed. It's not like his fault, but that's just the storyline. So Will asks Abe to write him a document saying that he's a free man, because past couple of years, since they haven't seen each other in a long time, Will started working with the Underground Railroad to get slaves out of the South and into the North where they're at. And apparently while he was gone, slavers found him, and he needed documentation to prove, hey, no, I'm a slave. Can you forge me some documents saying I'm a free man? And Abe's like, of course I will. So Abe and Will walk outside, and as they're walking, the slavers that were just mentioned show up. They're like, that's our guy. And Abe's like, leave us alone. And Abe kicks their asses, of course, because he's killing vampires. These racist ass dudes ain't worth nothing. And it lands him in jail. So then we cut to see Mary Todd has helped to release Will and Abe. And they have this like little thing where they're like making fun of Abraham, like playing jokes, but even Abe's being sad Abe, and he's like, you shouldn't be around me, even though she's like, I kind of like you. But in this too, apparently this moment makes him feel, oh, I should be in politics. So then we had a montage where Abraham Lincoln like starts by talking outside. He's like uh picketing on the street, soapbox. People are listening. People are clapping. When all of a sudden, Henry's in the crowd, and he's talking to him. He's like, "Yo, you know that we can't be in politics, right? This is the part about being low." And he's like, "Well, this is me laying low." Things like that. And then Henry's like, "Yeah, okay." So then Henry gives him his next assignment, and it's a silver pocket watch that says something on the inside. I forgot what it is. But Henry is there to tell Abraham that he has another assignment. And this is like, finally, he's going to go after the person who killed his dad because he didn't die, because Henry beat up the guy, and vampires can't kill vampires. Remember that when I tell you later that a vampire kills another vampire, or whatever the fuck happens. So then we see that Abe has returned to the dock from earlier where he got his ass kicked and attempted to kill the guy, Bart's. And he walks up to him, and this time, Bart sniffs the air and is like, Abraham, I can smell you. And then he swings his axe, and it hits the post, and he's like running away, and he's like playing to fight with him, while Abraham, angrily, because he's not having any thought, he's just trying to kill him, is failing. When all of a sudden, out of nowhere, so then the fight ensues and it starts a stampede. And Bart's hops on a horse and rides in it, and so does Abraham. So they're like fighting in the middle of a stampede on horseback, and they're fighting, fighting, fighting. Bart's falls off the ground, grabs the horse that's running at him, flings it around 180, and throws it at Abraham. It hits Abraham, and he kind of catches it. Like, it would have killed him because it's a big horse and all. But, like, Abraham catches it and sets it to the side and then hops on another horse and goes back to the front. And they're fighting each other on horseback in a stampede, axes and fists. And they're, like, running across, like, Matrix style, parkouring across the backs of these horses. And it's fucking fun. It is so fucking good. Like, I did not actually, that's why I know I hadn't seen this movie before, because I would remember that. So after some time fighting on the horseback, both Abe and Bart's, sorry, fall off of a cliff and down a ravine. They both survive, but then they start fighting for an axe. When all of a sudden, Bart's grabs the axe, points it at Abraham, and is talking to him like, "Now you're gonna die." When Abraham reaches up, grabs the head of the axe, and that's not just one axe; it's a gun. He shoots him with the axe. He walks up to him and it's like, "This is my vengeance," things like that. And then Bart's like, "You'll never succeed," just like typical villain stuff. And he kills him. It ends. We then get a scene where a woman is walking down the street and is being harassed and ends up being attacked by this man. And Henry, out of nowhere, sneaks out, grabs him, and bites him in the neck. We now learn that Henry is a vampire, and he has been the whole time. But he only feeds on evil people, and he only feeds on evil people. Abraham Lincoln comes up and is like, "You liar! I thought so." Like, angry because now he knows like the person who he's been working with is a vampire, so he tries to kill him. And Henry's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 stop! Let me explain." Henry is a vampire hunter, like he has always been. It's definitely earlier, like maybe 100 years before. I'm gonna guess 100 years. It's definitely poised in a way to show that it's a longer time. And Henry and his wife are going down the street when they come to a caravan of these people. Henry said, "Take this and go. Like, hurry and run." And Henry walks up, and we see that it is Adam, the king vampire. And they fight each other. Henry kills some vampires in slow motion when Adam gets the best of him. Adam holds him down and is like, "You've done a pretty good job killing us all, but now we'll curse you." And Adam turns Henry into a vampire. But not only that, they get Henry's wife, they hold her down, and Adam drains every drop of blood from her body right in front of Henry. This is where we then learn that when you're turned into a vampire, you can no longer kill another vampire. And even Henry said, or Adam says, only the living can kill the dead. So they leave Adam, or they leave Henry, and this is when we learn that Henry has always convinced a human who's not a vampire to become a vampire hunter, and he gives him the targets because he can't kill him, because a vampire can't kill another vampire. So Abe gets really like frustrated with him. He's like, I can't trust anything you say. How dare you teach me all these things? I give up and I quit. So then Abe goes to Mary's house and is like, will you marry me? And she says, of course I will. And Abraham Lincoln leaves the vampire slaying world behind. We cut to some time later, and Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln are now married. And Henry shows up to his wedding, and the two talk. Henry reminds him that Mary's not safe. She will never be. You started this. They will come after you. And Abe's like, I will kill you right now. Get out of my sight. So then we get a scene where Adam and Vadoma are talking, and they find Bart's body. I think it's Bart's body. They're like, we got to do something about this. So right after that scene, we cut to some time later. I'm going to guess there's a little bit of time. And Vadoma kidnaps Will, Abraham Lincoln's friend. Abe goes to Josh, his other friend, and Abe tells Josh about everything. He says, I'm a vampire hunter. This is real. Then we get a monologue where Abe's like, I don't know if he believes me. I really hope he does. And we get a title card that says New Orleans. The two arrive on the plantation to find that a party of vampires have paired themselves with like the slaves or the other people from the plantation. Because like as they're driving through, everything's empty, and they're like, "Where is everybody?" And this is like I said, there's like 50 vampires in this room, and each vampire has a human. And at once, Adam says, "Let dinner begin," and all these throats start to get ripped out. But in there, we see through the window that Will is in there. So Abe goes in and decides, I'm going to kill you. So Abe goes in and he starts kicking vampires' asses. This is another slow motion fight scene, choreographed awesome, 2012's. It is just like in Sherlock Holmes, the Robert Downey Jr. version, when he goes into like a fight cam where everything's in slow motion and he's like talking to himself. It's like that without the narration, which is popular at the time. Is really cool. So during this fight scene, we see that Will has narrowly escaped his like girl that he was dancing with, and is like running around the room trying to survive. And this is solely based on plot armor because out of nowhere, he kicks a vampire so hard that he kind of hits a wall. But Will then, the second another vampire walks out, they hit him in the side of the head and knock him out. So then we go back to Abraham Lincoln. He's kicking ass. Fun ass song plays, and they're all fighting. One vampire comes up. Abe chops him in half with his axe because he's cool as shit. When Adam walks up, and Abe swings at Adam, Adam grabs the axe, kicks his ass, and Vadoma hurls a chair at him and pins Abraham to the floor. This is when Adam walks up to Abraham and is like, you should join me. You're good at what you do. You should kill Henry. Because Henry's, of course, the leader of the vampire rebellion, which is some vampires. I'm gonna imagine there's other vampires in his call, but they're like, kill Henry, join us, we'll make you rich. You can all go. Of course, I don't think that would ever happen. Like, I don't think that he had any plans letting him go. He was just gonna kill him afterwards. And they're talking, and Adam begins to count down from 5, and when he gets to 0, he's going to kill Will, and he has up until that to decide what he's going to do. And right when he gets to 5, Joshua rides through the house, through the front door, in a horse and buggy like it's a car, completely disregarding the health and safety of the horse, drifts through the ballroom, picks up Will, picks up Abraham, and they ride off down the street like it was a race car. So then Will comes to and he leads Abe and Joshua out of New Orleans using the connections that he has with the Underground Railroad. And this is where we meet who else but Harriet Tubman. During this time, too, they're hiding in a church. The vampires are outside looking for Abraham and Will and Josh. And they luckily get away. They sneak back up north. We jump to some time later, and Abraham Lincoln has begun to rally an anti-slavery like militia. He's on the picket corners. He's like, "Don't do this, don't do this." Like, like historically he did, and this gets him to the member of. He starts becoming a political candidate. Where he starts working in politics. But this is when Henry and Abe have a very interesting conversation, which I thought was really dumb. But Henry is like, Abe, do not abolish slavery or don't fight this. Which I'm like, why would he do that? But Henry posits the idea that ending slavery would would start a quote unquote war with the South because Henry believes that if you get rid of the vampires' food, the vampires in the South will have nothing else to lose and they would go up north. Which, that is stupid. All of it's stupid. Slavery should be getting rid of, regardless of anything. And this is like the only time that Henry's anti-slavery, like pro-slavery, and it doesn't come back. So after a brief conversation, Abraham Lincoln says, "There's no more I can do. If I'm going to fight vampires, I have to do this way." And we get a scene where Abraham Lincoln puts away his axe. And instead of fighting with the axe, he fights with words and ideals. Until he becomes president. In a montage, we get Civil War battles, starting with Fort Sumter and jumping some time where now Abe is 50 years old. And goodbye, Abraham Lincoln. This is where they turn Abe like how we see him on the $5 bill. Long beard, tall hat, big nose, kind of ugly. I don't know why they decided to make Abraham Lincoln and turn him to Abraham Lincoln, but they do. And they age up everybody else. Like, even everybody still looks the same. We know a Mary Elizabeth Winstead. We know what she looks like. But then they add like wrinkles to her face. Anthony Mackie stays the same, except they add gray hair. Joshua Speed is there too, just cause, and they added a beard to him, and he walks with like a limp. So like they show us that it's been 50 years instead of us knowing that it's been like that, or it's not 50 years. The Abe's older now than he was before by aging everybody up, and it's kind of really dumb. Didn't really need to happen. So then we get at the end of this montage, we get Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, granting everybody in the South who is a slave free. We all know what that is. And as soon as that happens, we see that Vadoma has entered the White House and has snuck into Abe's son's room, Willie, and fights him and sadly kills him. Henry consoles Abe over the loss of his son. Henry tells Abe that he can restore his son by turning him into a vampire. And Mary comes in and says, "Henry, do it." Abe and Mary have a conversation. It's more of a fight. And Mary's like, "You did this. I read your journal. How dare you? You've cursed this family." She says something that I cannot even understand. Like, the audio, I guess, was pretty bad. But it's essentially like, do it. You ruined this family. But they don't end up doing it. So what happens, Henry and Abe are talking, and Henry says, "I will go to Adam and ask for a truce," because this is during the Civil War. It's starting now. It's getting too far, apparently. So they're going to try and decide what can happen, because they send Adam, who can't kill another vampire. So they have a conversation. We then get a scene where Adam is talking to Jefferson Davis, aka the King of Slavery, and assures him that the Confederate Army will be filled with vampires to fight on their side. We now get a scene where it's Gettysburg. We get an epic war shot as the Union are fighting the Confederate. They send cannons out. People are dying. People are dying. When a new wave comes through, and it's these vampires all like methed up, running at the Union soldiers. We get a shot where, as the army is running, they like all disevaporate in front of everyone at once, and the battle goes quiet. Like, they had instantly, in the snap of a finger, eliminated everybody on the battlefield and killed them all. We then see that the general, who is our point of view for this character, turns around and he sees that everyone's dead. And that's the end of that scene. Wish we would see more, but that was really cool. Nothing else happens like that. Wish some things more like that happened, because the montages and the cool action scenes are definitely where all the budget went, but it's also the best parts of the movie. So we cut back to Mary and Abraham back in the White House. Mary tells Abe, you must win the war, because if we've lost the war, we've lost everything. Our son is going to die for nothing. You must win the war. You must kill these vampires out of revenge. So then Abraham comes out with an idea where the Union's going to begin to use silver bullets to kill the Confederate soldiers / vampires. And then we get a montage, maybe so montages, where all the silver in Washington and in the North are all confiscated and they're melted down into weapons, bullets, cannonballs, such and such and such. So then we get a scene where Joseph, Abraham's friend, secretly meets up with Vadoma and tells her about Abe's plans. When asked why he turned against Abe, he says, I care more about the country than I do my friend, and I think that Abraham Lincoln is destroying this country, and we need to stop the war. Abraham and Henry meet up, and they're like, what are you going to do with all this? And he says, I'm going to turn it into weapons. And Abraham then says, we need to get this to Gettysburg as fast as we can. So then they decide to use the railroad. This is when Mary goes to Harriet Tubman and asks, help us evacuate Washington. I need to escape. Vampires are after me. Harriet's like, okay. Then we get a scene where Abraham goes upstairs and he opens up his chest. And inside is his axe and all his equipment. Then we get a really badass shot where Abe starts passing his axe back and forth in his hand until it gets really, really fast. It gets faster and faster and faster. He eventually drops the axe, but while rusty, Abe still has it. We then get a scene where Vadoma has gone to the other vampires and are like, we have to stop Abraham Lincoln. We have to stop this silver they're about to add to the field. So they all rally their troops and they march towards Washington, towards Gettysburg to be more specific. And then we get a shot of Abraham Lincoln, Joshua, and Will all on this train that's loaded down with silver, heading towards Gettysburg. It's all filled with the weapons. They're heading towards Gettysburg as well, and they are there to protect the train car from the potential vampire army coming. They know that they're on their way. They believe they're on the way. And Henry shows up. And Henry says, you know, your friend Joshua, he let him know that we're coming. We're going to be under attack. Of course, Abraham doesn't believe him because he's like, you're a vampire. Shut the hell up. Get out of my face. That's my friend. Then we get a shot that shows that the vampires are beginning to hop on the train. Will, in the back of the car, is loading his revolver, just like preparing for a fight, when he hears tapping on the outside. He opens up the shutter, aims his gun out, nothing. Opens up the other shutter, and a vampire grabs him, and they begin to have a fight. Will shoots the vampires, kills them, gets injured in the act, but that injury will go away soon. But we get a really cool scene. It's really funny. Will shoots a vampire, and he's laying next to him against the door. He's sitting up. He's all winded because his battle's over. Will opens up the door. The body of the vampire falls out, and he just closes the door behind him like nothing happened. But also during this time, Abraham also gets attacked by vampires. So Abe has his own badass fight scenes. Both of them end. They meet up, and they talk. Like, we have to get to the front of the car. We have to. Can't let anything stop. We have to kill all the vampires on the train. So William climbs on top of the train, and Abraham climbs through the bottom of the train, like in the train cars, and they slowly move forward, killing vampires in a montage as they appear. It's really badass, really, really fast. Cut awesome. They're fighting. So both parties are fighting forward. Eventually, Abraham Lincoln joins Will up top, and they do this awesome, cool thing where they like fight off vampires hand in hand. Like, William will grab a vampire, throw him at Abe, and Abe will slice the head off of the vampire that's flying through the air, and then kill another one. Then throw the axe to William, and he'll kill a vampire. It goes back and forth until they've like wiped out half of the squad. When Adam walks up and he grabs the axe, snaps it in half, axe gone. Tries to throw him off the train. Abraham runs to the side and grabs him and is holding him there. Adam goes to the top of Abraham and he's like, "This is your last chance." He's like that. "Stop what you're doing. Kind of like, join me or die." Abraham, of course, is like, "No, you're going to have to kill me." And Adam rears his head back to bite Abraham. We see that Abe was not bitten, but instead, Henry was bitten. And since he's already a vampire, already does nothing. So then Henry and Adam fight. As Abe gets up, he pulls Will. They're like, we gotta do this. It's now or never. Then we get a scene where Verdoma lights the bridge on fire. That's like ahead of them. It's all on fire. Bridge is starting to collapse. Adam throws Henry against. So Adam and Henry are fighting. They go into a train car. Adam throws Henry against a box, and Henry begins to laugh. Adam's like, "What's so funny?" And he just like keeps laughing. Adam walks over and he realizes that the train is a decoy. They are not delivering iron, but instead they're delivering rocks, because Harriet Tubman is the train. She used the Underground Railroad, and she has delivered the weapons to Gettysburg. So then we get a scene where Joseph walks from the front of the train to the back, and Joseph finds Adam. We learn that Joseph lied to Adam to get all the vampires there in one place. Adam then kills Joseph and turns him into a vampire. Or maybe a vampire. So then the bridge collapses. Abraham and Will look at each other and they're starting to run, and in like a slow motion, they're jumping from train to train as the car behind them falls back into the fire. They're just ever moving forward, and they slowly begin to fall into the void below. Will and Abraham fall off the train and onto the bridge, where they begin to run again, which I don't know how you just hop off of a moving train onto a bridge like nothing happens. And they begin to run, and Adam calls Abraham to fight him on the burning bridge. Abe punches Adam through the. So Adam calls Abraham to fight him on the bridge. Abe is like, it's all come down to this. It's like a really power up moment of, I've vowed to kill you. That's what I'm here to do. Abe gives him a yeah, lol, you can try. And Abraham punches Adam as soon as he gets to him. And in his hand, he had his silver pocket watch, punching him through the heart, killing him instantly. They somehow land back on the train, don't know how, but then the train becomes the little train that could, and as the bridge is collapsing, the rails are facing downhill, and the train is starting to go uphill. It's about to get to the top, and it starts to fall. When Henry jumps down and holds the track together, keeping the train from going over and giving enough time for Abraham and Will to hop off the train and onto solid ground. We then get a scene that shows that the Underground Railroad and Harriet Tubman has made it to the front lines in the Union soldiers. Mary Todd is there passing out weapons to soldiers like, "Here's your bullets, use these, use these, use these," when she gets a glimpse to see that Vadoma is there. And she remembers that Vadoma was there the day that her son was killed. So now she knows that she killed her son. So Mary arms herself with a weapon and follows her to a different part of the camp. Vadoma appears to her and is like, "Prepare to die." And Mary's like, "Yeah, you too, bitch." And Mary takes her son's toy that he was playing with, which was made out of silver, shoves it into the rifle, and as Vadoma is running towards her, Mary pulls up the gun, shoots her in the head, leaving the sword, like the toy sword, embedded in her head, killing her. Really badass, slow motion, worth the watch. So then we get a shot to show that the vampire army is being destroyed, ending the Civil War. And then Abraham Lincoln gives his famous Gettysburg Address, and it scores the scene as we see the war come to an end. And we jump to some time later, and we get we jump to some time later, and Abe describes the downfall of all the vampires. He says that all the vampires have left America. There's no more vampires in the States because they know that from now on, any vampire that goes there will be killed on sight. So then he's writing in his journal, and Mary Todd walks in and is like, Abe, we're late for the theater. And Henry's there, and they're talking. Henry's like, let me turn you into a vampire so we can rule forever. Like, not like evilly, but like, let me turn you into a vampire so we can help people forever. Things like that. Then Abe's like, yeah, lol, no, that's okay. And he's like, hold on to this. And Abe gives Henry his journal. And during this time, Abraham Lincoln gets up and goes to the theater where we know he dies. They don't really talk about anything like that. So the film ends with Henry's voiceover narration as we cut into modern day, talking about our history, is grateful for what Abraham Lincoln did, but they only know part of what he did. So then we cut to Henry in the bar, sitting next to a guy who's just pounding shots. And he turns to him and he says, a guy drinking like that has two things on his mind. One, he's about to ask a woman out, or two, he wants to kill somebody. Guy stands up, Henry pats him on the back, and a gun falls to the floor, just like Abraham Lincoln back in the day. Movie cuts to black, and Linkin Park's Powerless begins to play, because if it's a 2012 movie and it's an action movie, Linkin Park's got to play at the very end. And that's the movie. So all in all, I really like this movie. It was a lot of fun to watch, and my notes were really shitty because I was too busy fist pumping in the air instead of taking notes. So I apologize for that. If you want to have this movie do you justice, maybe watch the movie yourself. It's only $3 on YouTube. Do with that information as you will. Now's the time of podcast where we're going to talk about what we would do if we were in that situation. Firstly, if vampires were real, I'm going to get me a fucking axe. That was cool as shit. It cut through people like they were butter. And I would hope that I have enough rage in me that I can chop down a tree in one swing. The one thing I do wish that they would have done more is have gadgets. Some things that I like about horror movies, like vampire movies, specifically like this is the first thing that comes to my head, from Dusk to Dawn. The characters in that use the same old silver stakes, things like that, but they also use like holy water hand grenades, which is a water balloon. But I wish that this movie had stuff like that because I thought that was really cool. The fight scenes between characters when they were choreographed in slow motion were really, really badass. But that doesn't help drive the story forward. But if you're also watching this, you are not watching it for story. So if I was in a zombie apocalypse, if there were vampires, I would keep the axe. I'd keep the gun because you can kill a vampire from a distance. Why would you need to get face to face? And I would have like garlic bombs and other things like that I could use to like get you out of this location and move you over here. But I also think I would take the offer to become a vampire. I take that back. In this world, the one vampire rule that pisses me off is a vampire can't kill another vampire. Like the dead can't kill undead. I thought that was kind of dumb. And that's the one thing that I don't like in some vampire media. But it's also not the same. In True Blood, they do this thing where if I turn you into a vampire, I'm your master. And you can't harm me. Which that makes sense. But in this one, having all vampires not be able to do damage against, like, hurt or try and kill another vampire is strange to me. Because going back to like when Henry and Adam fight, they're both fighting to kill each other. Which, with the logic that we learned in Henry's flashback, we see that even trying to stab another vampire has it where you won't make contact. And these guys are like trying to throw each other off the like side of cars, trying to stab each other with pieces of wood, things like that. So that's a little bit of plot armor that just doesn't work, and it's a big plot hole for the film. But outside of that, a lot of fun things that happened throughout the film. I do think that vampires out of all like proper monsters might be my least favorite. I just don't really care for them too much. Like if I was put in a vampire movie, I'd probably be really fucked just instantly. Unless I once again had Abraham Lincoln's axe or anything. But vampires to me are really boring unless it's True Blood and it's more about relationships and love and other regular violence that was really interesting. But I don't really care that much for vampire movies. So I think I would put vampires as like my least favorite monster. Now that I think about that. I just want to thank everybody for listening. I know this was a really weird episode. I'm coming off of a long weekend and I really need some sleep. I just don't feel I don't feel like I'm 100%, but I really wanted to get something out there. Wanted to keep with the schedule. So I haven't yet decided what movie we're going to do next week. You can follow me at Survive the Haunt at Instagram, where I'll fill you in on what to expect next. Once again, just thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, send it to somebody else. I really want this audience to grow, and I really want to try and make it to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I don't think that's a big ask. I think it's possible. So if you're enjoying what you're listening to, send it to a friend. Give me 5 stars. Even just give me a comment. Give me anything. Anything you have to say, just let me know. Moving forward, the only thing that I really have to work on is just what do you guys want to hear? What do you guys expect from this channel? And it's important. Give me some feedback. I will take it as if it's even like criticism, it's constructive criticism. I can't wait to see what we have in the future. And I just once again thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.